Hello, we are here today with Marika and Marianne Reuse to discuss the EduCASE-funded project called A Global Learning Space, Empowering Students for Responsible Global Engagement. I am originally a primary school teacher. I am finishing now my master's degree in education and globalization at the University of Oulu, and I am participating in UniPID and in this project as a research assistant and student consultant.
And my name is Marika Matengu. I work here at the University of Oulu as a university teacher in the intercultural teacher education and globalization programs, and have been teaching in this course that has been part of this project for the past few years. So happy to be here with you and with you, Marianne.
Yes, likewise. So Marika, could you tell us a little bit how you got to be involved in this EduCASE-funded project?
Okay, so we have been working with UniPID for quite a while, and some of our courses also are part of the catalog for UniPID. And it has been a discussion for some time that how do we engage meaningfully with the students, and how do we develop the courses in such a way that they can be transformative for the students. And this course on global education development has been one that engages students from so diverse backgrounds and different experiences. And as a teacher, I think for me, it has been important that the discussion that students would be having in these courses would be something that transforms their thinking and understanding. And as a teacher, we often also ask, how can I develop my pedagogy? What can I do to engage students more meaningfully? How the students as partners approach also started becoming more and more closer to me in the UniPID dialogue with the colleagues also. This be something that we can further develop out of the course and also enrich our own learning as university teachers, but then also the experience of the students by applying something new.
Right. Yes, I remember last year that I also took part of the Global Education Development course as a student at the time. And then, yes, I didn't know much about UniPID and the other virtual courses that they had. And as soon as I saw this opportunity to be involved in this project, but then again, take part in the course from another perspective, from a student consultant role, I think I saw the opportunity to, try to see how to implement these approaches, this dialogical approach, and students as partners to further develop a virtual course, which already I think is such a challenge, considering connectivity issues. How can we further implement discussions and connections between the students and the teachers in a virtual environment? So what were some of your expectations when you decided to participate in the project?
Yeah, and maybe also to come back to the previous question, I think there are some themes and some sort of concepts and topics that require particularly us to be reflective of our experiences, and also to be able to engage in dialogue that would be on a more mutual basis, and that all the experiences are valued. And I think the kind of issues that we deal with in the global education development course, looking at issues of equity and justice and global education itself and the diverse concepts related to that, really call us to rethink in which ways do we study this kind of topics, and that it doesn't remain just as a theoretical knowledge. What are we previously understanding about these issues, and how do we relate them to our context, and how do we relate them to global issues?
Right. Yeah.
And I think somehow these are the issues that I started reflecting and asking myself. And I felt that as a teacher, engaging with students as partners in developing and redesigning the course would be meaningful for me.
Yes, definitely. I think also I've seen it as a student here in Finland, but also participating in this project. One of the main concepts and elements of the project was this culture change and trying to be critical of the hierarchies that are in place in academia. And I think our roles as teacher, as student consultant, could be rethought. And I think, yeah, as students, as partners, trying to aim for this, as you were saying, like equal distribution of works, equal distribution of responsibilities, and also working towards the same goal, I think has been one of the expectations that I had, and that has been met, at least in my experience in this project. Yeah, I would like to dive in more into dialogue. What has been your experience before and during the project with dialogue?
Okay. Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, and because dialogue is somehow always part of our course implementation, especially in the EdClo and ITE program where I teach. I think getting the diversity of student perspectives is always important, and dialogue is part of it. But as we have been implementing this course through this student as partners approach, I feel that I have had to rethink again, what is meaningful dialogue? And we can all ask ourselves, when have we been involved in meaningful dialogue? How does it feel to be part of a meaningful dialogue? And what sort of process is it? And I think it is something where we become honest, we become authentic, we become meaningfully participating, find relevance, we find space for our voices. And which is not that easy. And I think we often take it also as granted when we, for example, put students into breakout rooms during a sort of online course implementation. There's first a topic that is covered, and then we sort of give the students the opportunity to have the dialogue in the breakout rooms. But it's taken for granted that the dialogue just sort of develops. There's some certain questions that guide the students. And I think during this course implementation, I have realized myself that it needs more, especially when we are dealing with topics like in the global education development course, we have talked about coloniality, we have talked about hierarchies and power and equity and justice. So how do we sort of not only talk about those topics, but learn to build dialogue where we also implement the principles or the concepts that we are actually learning about. And yeah, I think we can recall moments where we have been meaningfully engaged in dialogue, because they are the ones that are transformative. We feel them with our body, soul, and mind. And I think that's when we often forget about the time, because we are tuned into engaging with one another in a meaningful way.
Yes. I think one very important element that we developed in this course this time to promote dialogue was taking the framework from Timeout, and that we developed the 6 principles for meaningful dialogue, and that we reminded students in each session that we were trying to promote dialogue in these certain ways. So that it was very important for us to engage in the conversation, try to value each other's points of views, be humble that we come from different backgrounds and might have different experiences. And all these things, I think, are relevant in terms of dialogue. What research says is, how can we co-create knowledge, and how dialogue and having conversations, especially I think in the context of the topics of the course, that, as you're saying, are very important and sometimes hard to discuss, like if we're talking about positionality or justice or privilege, how can we foster a more egalitarian relationship between the students coming from different backgrounds as well as with the teachers. So I think we were trying to see this dynamic not only between students, but also with the teachers with me, participating in the breakout rooms, for example. Yeah, I think another element very important for this project has been the context of a virtual course, and also the global inequalities and participation of Global South and Global North students and teachers. How has that experience been for you in this context?
Yeah, and maybe also a little bit more about the course implementation itself, how it's sort of structured in the global education development course. And how did this course sort of become the one where we want to sort of develop new approaches. I think the course structure itself was something that perhaps provided a good platform for us to test new pedagogies and new approaches. The course has 8 different sessions, and each one focusing on a slightly different topic, starting from the theoretical, conceptual understandings, and then understanding decoloniality and moving into more indigenous perspectives, having a midterm sort of mid-course reflection on what we have learned so far, and then the 4th session is more related to sustainable development goals, and then moving on to GEM report, Global Education Development, Global Education Monitoring Report, before the panel discussion at the end. So there is like 8 different sessions and lots of independent reading to do in between, and also some tasks for each of the modules. But I think having guest lecturers visiting in each of the Zoom sessions and then providing sufficient time for the dialogue happening in the breakout rooms was very important. And I think this kind of online virtual course implementation has previously worked well, but I think this breakout room discussions in the past have been more like questions and answers. And I think when we leave it to the students, especially in a plenary session, to ask questions openly, there may be always certain voices that get a little bit more space. And that also means that certain perspectives are missed. And I think that is what was quite fruitful in this spring's course implementation, that we were able to give more attention to how do we utilize the time that we have for dialogue, so that it doesn't just become a voice for some, but it would be a space that would engage and invite everybody to share their perspectives in a more meaningful way. So I think in that sense, my experience was that this was a good platform to test out how we can approach meaningful dialogue with the topics that are quite challenging.
Right. Yes, I agree. And I think we've also experienced the students as partners approach in the collaborative work that we've done together.
Yes.
Just in case other people didn't know. So our relationship before this project was as a teacher and as a student. And now, as I am involved in the project as a student consultant, we saw how through the development of the course and throughout the project, our contributions and collaborative work has also evolved, I would say. At the beginning, of course, we decided that we wanted to design activities that would foster dialogue. But I recognize in myself that at the beginning I was still in this student mindset and like very insecure of like trying to bring my own contributions to those activities. And then I saw how you trusted me and valued my contributions, and that, made me more confident to the point that, I actually designed the module 4, for example, that was a complete module focused on student engagement and participation that fostered dialogue between the students. And I led that course session. So I think, it's not only the approach talking about it and designing it, but also how us have experienced it throughout the project. Yeah.
Very true. And I think I could continue from the teacher's perspective that I think it was really helpful that we had some background reading. We had also joint sessions together with the UniPID team to discuss this. But eventually the work with this course led us to come together several times planning for the next session. And I think what I found maybe challenging in the beginning is, where do I find my role? How do I redefine myself in relation to you and us working together? Though I think we do not have that kind of a hierarchical relationship so much in our courses, but still there is that teacher in me who would like to hold on to sort of, how do I maneuver and how do I manage this as a teacher? Is it professional from my side to start asking more questions and your suggestions on how would you think this could be done? So I think in the beginning it's difficult to let go and reposition yourself as I assume also as a student and as a teacher as well. But I think as the course developed and we got together, we tried to create time in the busy schedules to discuss how the implementation should go. I really started seeing the fruit of it and how the students' perspective. You had been part of this course in the past. You had participated in it. You had seen its implementation. How you had more experiences from student perspective than I had, and I think it really enriched the implementation of the course. And I don't think it was anything away from any of us as this approach of student as partners, but it added a lot of value. Definitely. Which I think definitely for me at least it will stay for beyond this course as well. Yeah.
Well, I think that's very valuable considering that another part of this project is also the creation of a toolkit that promotes pedagogical inclusive practices that UniPID wants to apply in other virtual courses. So how can we promote dialogue and partnerships in the context of other virtual courses, not only in the global education development one, but I think as you're highlighting now, like this change of culture and how your participation and your understanding of this approach has developed throughout the course is very valuable, thinking about how to implement this in other courses and how we can share this experience with other teachers or course coordinators, for example. So I don't know if you have any more challenges or opportunities that you would like to highlight in the context of this project.
Yeah. Well, maybe going a little bit more into the details of what we planned together and how we did that. So if we had a Zoom session coming that would cover a certain module, I would perhaps be more involved in with the guest speaker, thinking about the content of what kind of concepts or what kind of contents this session is going to cover. And then together we were thinking what are the kind of activities, assignments, instructions, questions. I think you had a lot of ideas in terms of what kind of platforms students could collect their thinking and their reflections, what kind of virtual platforms, which to me are not that familiar. But for you, I think you were very, very aware of what kind of tools could be used. And I think that was really valuable. I would also say that I think we could, or the students as approach could be also, student as partners approach could also be used more from the very beginning of the course. I think now we had kind of structure ready and we focused on those kind of reflections that we had at the end of the session, but it could also be from the very beginning of the design of the course. And in that way, I think it would be maybe even more meaningful to have the input from the students' perspective and the joint collective work. How do we design the whole course? Just sort of group work or breakout room sessions and activities and assignments.
Yes, I completely agree with what you're saying. I think in part of our recommendations for other course coordinators or teachers that would like to implement students as partners, foster more dialogue and partnership in their courses, I think it's very important to first be conscious if you are redesigning a course or you are trying to incorporate these approaches, like finding moments in a course that is already structured, like it was our case, or if you're designing a course from the beginning, how you can start to design the course with these approaches embedded from the beginning. Those things are very different, and we saw in our experience how that was. And also just like setting the expectations from the beginning too, sharing it with the teachers and with the students that participate in the course, trying to tell them what are your expectations and your assumptions on their participation, how you want them to engage and participate in these meaningful dialogues so that they have a meaningful learning experience and that they take part in their learning experience.
Yes. Yeah. And I think very often we sort of ask feedback from students after the course has been implemented. But somehow I think the students as partners approach calls us to shift our mind a little bit in terms of that, and perhaps from the very beginning have students not as just students in the course, but as really truly partners that have ownership and agency in terms of the kind of topics we are going to be covering, and also the assignments and reflections. So I think personally I have found this very fruitful process, and I would love to use this approach also in the other courses that I'm implementing, and see how to develop that kind of approach. I do believe that it has been for the students also more transformative than just sort of having questions and answers at the end of each session, because they've done something meaningful together where everybody's voice has really been invited to be part of the discussion.
Well, thank you so much for participating in this fireside chat discussion on the EduCASE-funded project. It was a very insightful conversation, and we could reflect on our experiences participating in this project. So I hope it was as meaningful for our viewers, and thank you so much for hearing and participating in this discussion.